Hi, everyone, and welcome to another webinar in our series, Restart 2021. And in this series, we are helping business leaders from both the SME and the corporate sector, adjust to a life after COVID. Today in our series, which is organized by Economy Next in partnership with the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Economic Freedom Sri Lanka office. This is a 10-part series, and this is the second one. And today we are looking at the future of work. The talent pool is our most valuable resource actually going forward. And I think how we manage them going forward is going to be a very crucial part of how we embrace the prosperity that is before us. Before I start, I have three wonderful friends who don't need much of an introduction. So what I'm going to do is just mention their name and the organization they work for, and we're going to get straight into it. I'm delighted to be joined by Ishan Dantanarayana, who is the Chief People Officer of the Brandix Group. Joining him is Surani Amerasinghe, who is the Chief Head of Human Resources for Brewery PLC, and last but not least, our good friend Chandi, Dharmaratne, who is the VP Human Resources for Virtusa. So I'll start off with you, Ishan. So many experts have talked about how value will be created in the post-pandemic world, right? And it will require a humongous effort in terms of shifting the talent base as we come out of it, right? At the moment, we are firefighting really just to keep operations going and keep our heads just above the water. But I think going forward, we'll need to look at other aspects, in terms of workforce planning, strategy, and even change management. And all of these will have to be dealt with together while we come out of this pandemic. How can we create this right balance, Ishan, going forward?
Post-COVID, it's going to be very different. So I think the way that we face all these challenges will also have to be different. You spoke about workforce planning. Now, if you take workforce planning more than before, with COVID, what everyone realized first by working from home, that your talent pool is definitely a global talent pool. So there is no geographic boundaries for talent anymore. Then gig jobs are becoming popular. Something that is also emerging is the fact that earlier there are more than before, there can be more females coming into the workforce by working from home. So all these things have to be taken into account in terms of career development, succession, and all that. Then in terms of, that's about workforce planning. Then in terms of rewards, the new way of work will mean that, people are not, or most of them don't like to work full-time, maybe 8-hour jobs. So they are opting to hourly, daily, weekly jobs, or even assignment-based, flexi jobs. So the measure of success is going to be not how many hours of work you put in or how visible you are in various forums. It's going to be the output and value that you're going to bring in. So when this happens, you also have to align your rewards, and through rewards, your retention, because the fact that, like I said before, it's a global pool of talent with this emergence of COVID. So the things that we do are completely changing. Then itself, change management comes in, because now globally, I was talking to the Boston Consultancy Group. What they said was, now most companies in the US are thinking, how do we get the workforce back to work? Because now they have been at home, they have got used to a way of life. And some of them even have done their startups. So they're wondering, how do we get them back? Because they have felt the flavor of independence. So how do you get them back? Then another challenge I would see is, like you said, achieving a balance of all this. So, your processes, your systems, the way you work, the way you develop talent is going to change. In that scenario, I think technology is going to play a major role. That's where the AI and the robotics and the big data, all of them are coming in, because how people work, their preferences, how they feel working in the new way of work, you need a lot of data to take your decisions. And the way that, we evaluate and recognize people's performance, the way that we have to respect personal space and time, all this can come through a lot of data. So even us, we are doing a lot of data gathering in terms of our decision making. So what we did was we from Brandix, we categorize employees in this new scenario of work. We call it hub, club, home, roam. Hub is where employees have to come to work most of the time, like the factories, employees and things like that. Club is, we have 28 locations in Sri Lanka. They can work out of any locations closest to their place. Home is where predominantly you're working from home. Roam is, you can work from client site or one of these new offices where you can plug and do your work. So we categorize like that. Also looking at all our processes to see how do we adjust our processes to new way of work, and that's where the way that we looked at things in the past have to drastically change to adapt to this transformation and change.
So I want to just take one aspect of what Ishan said and dive deep into it. Your workforce is a little bit smaller, obviously a lot smaller than what Brandix, but I think more focused on the quality because a large part of your output is actually automated, right? So therefore, I think you're going to have this problem much more. Also, how do you reward specific performance? In a time where there's so much of flux.
Okay, actually, you mentioned the right word, flexibility. I think that has been the key, not just in the future, but also the last couple of years going through COVID. Right. Like you've rightfully said, I mean, there were months where we were closed, there were months we were open and so on. And gone are the days that we can actually hold people responsible for hitting their numbers or their KPIs. And therefore, we've actually had to reevaluate our whole performance management process as well as exactly what do we evaluate. So we've actually used two main performance criteria. One is actually, yes, we look at the performance of an individual for that given period of time. So, when the markets were open and we were able to go out there and sell. So that was vital when we looked at performance managing or performing or evaluating the tasks of the sales workforce. But at the same time, we've also looked at how hard an employee has had to try, or the effort in better words, during this period to ensure that the overall sustainability of the organization was utmost. So whether it is manufacturing, whether it is the sales and marketing, whether it is actually how we worked as a team, it was the effort that we also evaluated. But of course, effort was great, but at the end of the day, we still need to pay bills, we still need to pay people, and we also needed to differentiate because rightfully so, you said we don't have a large population of employees, and every single employee needed to ensure that they made that difference. So we do differentiate. We differentiate based on, like I said, yes, we are able to perform as norm for 3 months of the year, yes, close. But so therefore, we will take those chunks and evaluate individual performance. So it's two ways, yeah? So one is that during that period, and the other one is the flexibility, effort, and so on. So the second part is, yes, manufacturing entity work 24/7, because with a product like this, we can't really close down the factory. But our biggest issue we faced was that the people who usually came into office were told to work from home, and therefore managing their performance all of a sudden from a, face-to-face environment, they were working from home, and they were not quite culturally ready for it. And therefore, our biggest or the most urgent task for us was to get our line managers up to speed as to how to manage a group of people that were working from home, that were working remotely. Gone were the days where they would look to see what time are they coming in, what was the quantity of work, and so on. So that was another area that we've had to look at. As for reward, we are in a highly competitive environment. Yes, we are a technologically advanced entity, and therefore we also compete for talent across all segments of not just manufacturing, but FMCG as well. And therefore reward has was required for retention and motivation. And so therefore we again used our existing differentiating policies, differentiating again once and for all effort, as well as reaching those KPIs in those fixed or set periods. But the reward aspect, we didn't cut corners. We felt that was vital. And the loyalty and the motivation was utmost, once again, to ensure that the sustainability of the business and to be able to get through this period was vital.
Chandi, I come to you now, and you are in a very interesting industry. You would think before the pandemic it was the most best geared towards remote work, but during the pandemic, two concurrent things happened. One is staff could almost were almost forced to work exclusively from home, right? No option to really come into office during certain months of last year and this year as well. And the second thing is, the lines of working from home, and what time you work also kind of got blurred, right? So in the past, you could work at office, come home and do a little bit of work, but now you are working, all times of the day. And I think even in your industry, this could have led to all sorts of issues in terms of the employee experience of work, what work is, and how and what they felt they were contributing, and so on. How did you handle the the employee experience during this period?
Yeah. So Imran, so how I would like to explain that is, if you look at the past decades, especially companies like us and maybe also in different industries, have worked really hard in order to make sure that we build this cohabitation, or on how we reimagine the way we work. And we started using a lot of digital collaboration. We started using data analytics. We started using cloud-based connectivity, and also artificial intelligence, AR, VR, ML, and all of that, right? And we also looked at how we can have this gig economy, how we can have flex work hours, and all of those concepts, and how we can internalize it. So in my opinion, all that happened was, with the COVID, it accelerated it. And we actually got the opportunity to truly leverage on the decades of work that has been done in building the foundation for employee engagement, connectivity, and digital transformation. And what should be happening now, and what is happening now, is using all of that, say ML, AI, and data analytics, in order to now offer the employee an even more personalized emotional connect as a result of it. So that's how we would like to look at it.
Look, I think we all agree that diversity is a critical aspect of bringing out the best in your workforce, in terms of gender, sexuality, being different labels, so on. But what I noticed in Sri Lanka, at least in terms of the workforce, is there's a lot of there's a lack of diversity in how people think. There's a lot of group think, and I think in a pandemic kind of situation where there's so much of disruption, we need to create this diversity in the way we think among our talented workforce. How do we do that? That's going to be a particular challenge going forward as well.
Yeah, so I think in crisis, like you said, Imran, this diversity, and you spoke about diversity becomes a very critical aspect, because that's where the different contributions come in. So to even us, when we face a crisis from all our global locations, and also even our back office Accenture, there was a lot of value that came in because of the diverse workforce. And so diversity is something that we really value, and to enable that and to see that, okay, how do you follow through this? We are really promoting this culture of transparency and learning. So we are also creating these leaders to be taking a very listen to understand approach rather than listen to answer approach. So that way we are creating this coaching culture across, where the individuals feel that they are listened to, their opinions are listened to, and that's impacting the course of business in the company. So through that, we are trying to see, to Surani's earlier point, we are trying to see that how do we make this, now that we have changed, how do we keep this consistent? So we have set up a process in terms of tracking and governance also, because when there is rapid change, when there is transformation, when people are expecting flexible process, and final outcome is their experience. So today, everything that we do has to be very individual centric, because they are looking at the personal experience that they will have. So to do that creating that respecting diversity, learning culture, coaching discussions, all those becomes critical to sustain this in the long run. So that's where we are starting with the leadership, and we are trying to convert the leadership thinking to the new way of life.
That's awesome. Chandi, how are you handling this whole concept of diversity and the kind of thinking that we need, the diverse kind of thinking that we need going forward post-crisis?
Yeah. So I think, in my opinion, I think diversity, and you said Sri Lanka, I don't think it's necessarily a Sri Lanka, or it's a global thing. I mean, lots of articles and books written about the importance of diversity. And just to bring in a data point there, I was reading this article that BCG has done a survey with 1,700 companies in eight geographies. And they said that diverse leadership increases innovation and also profitability. And they said a company with diverse leadership increases revenue by 19% due to innovation. So you kind of create a culture of innovation as well. So, I mean, I agree with Ishan and Surani on this, where I think the most important thing is to create that kind of a culture, and to create a culture where people feel uncomfortable and that their feedback or that their participation is valued and it's transparent, is to leverage, and especially given the working models that we have today, is by leveraging technology, leveraging platforms. And when you get into a platform, or when you're on a chatbot, or when you're on a certain, say, Yammer, it could be the CEO of the company and a tier 4 coming in order to complete a project. And these young people are also very comfortable in that kind of platforms, where you don't necessarily have to have this, face-to-face interaction, sitting down in a meeting room. So I think that is the way that we need to create that kind of an ecosystem, by figuring out in our everyday processes from the hire to retire, how do we actually incorporate this kind of a diversity feedback coming in from different levels of the organization, different cultures, different geographies, and incorporate it.
Okay. If I may add to what Chandi said,
please.
I also fully endorse what you say, Chandi, because today employees are looking at getting rid of boring jobs. So that's why even we are using chatbot, because it's really helpful. Then, data entry. So we are using robotics instead of employees entering data. So, because today's young workforce, they want this challenge and not these boring jobs. So we have to change with time.
To manage a remote workforce, I think you need a lot of, honest feedback, and also you need a lot of regular feedback, right? And we live, while our workforce may be global, we still live in a country where giving regular feedback, I'm not sure whether that is a norm. So how do we, create that culture of giving very regular? I know you have a very tech-based solution to it, but I don't think in general, the rest of the country may have that luxury. But how do you, create this culture of giving regular feedback so you know where you're going?
So from a tech perspective, obviously, like you said, Imran, we do have the systems in place, and obviously it's always work in progress. There's always room for improvement and continuous improvement. So we do have platforms where you do measure, like Surani said earlier, like 24/7, how you're performing, kind of feedback is what we're going into. And we are very transparent. Like even if you're working on a certain project, you would know your performance. Even the HR team would know your performance. There are leaderboards and dashboards and all of that. That creates that kind of a transparency. So when you talk about feedback, feedback is a culture where, if you feel like you can trust, employee can trust, employee feels that they are being fairly treated and everything is transparent, then the regular feedback and everything becomes just a culture. So it can't be that the company decides, okay, tomorrow we want to have that kind of a culture. You need to invest in the platforms and digitalize and talk from an IT perspective. And at the same time, it has to be bite-sized. So if you're looking at an employee journey, hire to retire, everything that happens in between from performance management, the learning and development, everything has to incorporate the need for you to give and take feedback. So leaders should also be free to ask for feedback. But there is a misconception sometimes when we say feedback, people are thinking it's always constructive or negative feedback. Feedback is also positive. I mean, you have a feedback culture, you're creating, increasing innovation.
So, I'm just coming to you, I was just before we started this recording. I actually was on a call with an HR person in a company in Australia that struggling to hire because in a perverse sort of way, the closing of our borders has meant that there is a very like a permanent bar on people coming in, and those days we used to have a large number of people getting into the workforce, and I think when the pandemic ends, you could see the opposite of that, where countries like Sri Lanka, where people are effectively not able to really use up the migration option which they did before, could suddenly see that opened up, right? And so going from fearing for your job, you're now looking at options globally, right? And this whole issue of how do you find and keep your best talent is going to be another problem in a different kind of way in a few months to next year. How do you handle that?
One of the main criteria for both retention and poaching, if I may use that word, or hunting is actually culture, because the money is exactly the same. The brand of the corporate brand is exactly the same. So a candidate A would have opportunities with 3, 4, 5 top-notch companies, as they would call it. And yet then they would start looking, okay, so why you? So similarly, the existing employees would always think, okay, fine, I've got this great opportunity paying me good 10, 20, 30% more. So why should I remain? So what I realized during the past 18 months, what actually helped us retain as well as attract more than hefty paychecks or packages, it has been culture. It has been culture, and to say, okay, fine, we are not risk averse. Actually, Chandi mentioned not being risk averse, and spot on. The not just the Gen Zs, but even the millennials are also very, very keen on moving on in their careers to companies that would allow them to experiment, learn in that whole process. They're also looking at opportunities to work with management, senior management as part of a team. So hierarchy is an issue. So culture seemed to have been the main factor for me to retain as well as attract. The second, I find, this sounds very cliche, but I am going to repeat it, especially the younger generation of people that have been recruiting, whether it is for management training, whether it is for executives coming into brewing or manufacturing or even sales, have actually looked at a course, which is strange because we are an alcobev company, right? So from one angle, we are a no-no because we're an alcobev. And on the other side, we do have these youngsters who come and say, okay, fine, so what else? So fine, you guys have the highest ranked FMCG brand in line, but then what else? Yes, you've got great bottom line, but what else? Yes, you've got brilliant bonuses and remuneration, but what else? And we've actually had to go back and see what else can we offer our people outside the norm of that remuneration and the culture aspect of it. And that has led us to think what makes sense from an individual point of view. So as we speak, we are evaluating, or we are actually re-looking at what is our corporate brand? What exactly do you want to B, not just for the internal population, but also the external. What do we stand for? And I think that's been vital. We are also listening more to our teams to understand exactly what they're looking for. And sometimes, like I said, it's not about the money, they're actually looking for experiences. What is our value proposition? Again, in today's context, a lot of companies may not be able to give careers, but is your value proposition a great place to learn, a great place to develop, and so on? So for us at Lion, which is, as you mentioned earlier, it's a very small entity when it comes to headcount, because we're a very flat structure. We can't provide the careers that maybe a large entity could or a multinational could. And therefore, what our value proposition is no more about money, but it's about, hey, you come here, we give you to experiment with a brand that no other company will be able to give you. We will be able to give you an opportunity to work in high technological background and with a group of people, colleagues who are as skilled and qualified as you. So the chances of peer development and learning is higher. So that's what we're going after. And another thing that we also feel is that if we can keep these guys for 3 to 4 years, yeah, we're happy. And we want them to come back, and we want them to go out there and say, yep, Lion is a great place to work. So it's twofold. One is culture. Culture has been the most vital both ways. I've lost people. It's very, very sad. And they point blank said, but Surani, this place is better. And this is why I'm going. And the most recent feedback I've been getting at interviews is that, what do we stand for? So it's no more about the brand of your corporate, but what does it really mean and stand for? So yes, so we are already in competition, by the way. Forget post-COVID.
Excellent news for the employees, but also excellent news for the CEOs, because from what I'm hearing from all of you, culture is something doesn't cost a lot of money to instill. It's attitude, right? And that's why startups are able to sometimes get the best employees out there. I'm surprised that startups that pay nothing, almost nothing sometimes, in the hope of some shares, are able to hire. Coming to Ishan, something you said struck me very interestingly. Even in a large workforce, which has, it's not a very complicated industry you're in, the staff seem to be not really wanting to be in, very mundane tasks or, doing repetitive tasks or things that bore them. You think that, that they'll be very fearful for their job, but they seem to want much more from their job than they ever did before, generations before. So how should the HR or talent function, keep in mind that the need for reskilling, moving away from the kind of jobs we did before, because it's getting automated, right? It makes no sense. And also with COVID, you would want as much automation as possible because machines work, right? While humans have to be in quarantine, machines keep working. So how do you, look at this whole concept of reskilling?
When I was in IT, I thought, apparel is a standard manufacturing process. But come here into apparel, I realized, oh my God, it's so complex in the form that, trends change, fashion change, everything changes so fast. And before the next season happens, you got to get your product manufacturing out, because if not, you go onto the sale and then you lose your customer loses your business. Or we have to air freight if there's a delay, and then the whole margin erosion is there. So to stay profitable, we have to see that we are very agile, very, very process driven, but also processes are consistently evaluated to see that, we call it plan, do, check, act, the circle of excellence. So with every cycle, we have to see how do we stay ahead? How do we stay ahead? To do that, it's not easy because, consistently things are changing, and competition from Bangladesh and all other Vietnam, China, there's a lot of competition coming in. So we have to see that people are not only ready in terms of skills today, but ready in terms of future skills. So we have to see that, okay, to see that what we have realized is, it's once again like Surani and Chandi said, it's all about the culture. how does culture help to see that, it's creating this knowledge base that we require with this change in trends in terms of skills. So how do we consistently upgrade our technical skills? And the soft skills are becoming also very critical because of the remote work. Because things like empathy, creativity, innovation, how do you give innovative thoughts, resilience, then stress tolerance with the way that we work. So these are also, like, if you go to the World Economic Forum, they are seeing these also as new skills. So we have to, if I summarize this whole thing, we have to change. We have to change our people. We have to start with the leadership thinking in terms of change. And we got to be not today ready, future ready. And train our people to be future ready. That's what we are focusing on.
Very interesting. And I see a very holistic approach to this, as opposed to, very, in silos. It's beautiful. I think you will have a very, very reskilled workforce going forward. One of the things I want to ask all of you, really, I've been waiting since the very beginning of this discussion to do so. See, when the pandemic started and we moved to, flexible and remote work, one of the greatest concerns were for me personally were for the, the welfare of new employees or younger employees. Because one of the things that happens in an office or in a water cooler or whatever you wish to call it, is that there is a lot of mentoring that happens on a one-to-one basis, right? It's not structured. It could be because some crisis happens, or you go through some sort of personal transformation. So when the pandemic hit, one of the biggest concerns I had personally was what's going to happen to these new employees who are coming in, what's going to happen to younger employees, because the ability to create networks, the ability to learn from experience, that is some of the the biggest things you get in a physical office, where you really get to meet with people, even the CEO or someone else. Now, how do we handle this whole concept of mentoring?
The thing is, Imran, we are a global company. So we hire, our project teams are based in multiple geography locations. Whilst, like Surani said, it's really nice and it's really good to have employees coming in and having that face-to-face interaction. At the same time, when you hire to a global project, they used to anyway have that kind of a interaction remotely. So what we are working on is to make sure that the process of post-COVID, people literally left the building, right? So we have to be agile, and we need to now be adaptable to see how we can make the best use of the way that we need to go forward. So a lot of work is being done in order to make sure that experience is, we're looking at different processes and seeing how we can actually make the process even better in the lens of a remote working view, whether it is onboarding or offboarding or even a coaching platform or any sorts of areas that we need to work on for employee engagement. From a role perspective, what I'm doing now is to look at all of those processes and to see how we can maybe enhance it, or maybe we can take off and add more processes, or maybe we need to have new things, innovations coming in order to have a better employee engagement and give a much more personalized view.
If I take a step back, we said we will segregate between coaching and mentoring. Because coaching, we said, to be a coach, you have to be certified as a coach, you have to be trained as a coach. So we have a coaching framework. Example, the leadership gets coached from CCL. I have a coach in CCL Singapore. Then the leadership themselves act as coaches for the layers below. So we act as coaches for the layer below. But coaching is a framework driven thing where you come prepared. You have a action point to work on thereafter. But coming on to mentoring, what we said was mentoring is, we created mentoring in the form of sounding board. Sounding board means I might come to you based on your experience and exposure and discuss something very informally. And through that, I will start thinking on how I can change, how I could do differently. But what happens is, typically in this coaching and mentoring discussions, it typically happens, it's a one-way street. The senior person is trying to tell the younger person on what to do and what not to do. So we said that's the cardinal sin in a coaching or mentoring. It's to leave seeds of thought and open that person's thinking by asking the relevant questions for that person to think. That's the way that that person develops. So for that, we Center for Creative Leadership, because they are ranked 4th in the world for leadership development. We develop this thing called better conversations every day. So all our leaders have to go through this, where they are having better conversations. Through that, it becomes a mentoring process where the junior ones are thinking on, how do I develop? Yes, I didn't think about it. Yeah, I could have done it this way. When you ask the questions, you're guiding that person to think, rather than, it's like giving the fishing rod rather than giving the fish. So that was a critical thing that we did. And we also said that in this whole process, the young ones have to be carved out separately also. So we created this under 30 and under 35 clubs, so that, they themselves can interact closely, and they are being mentored by their seniors, but including in their own groups, through the various subject matter experts that they have, it becomes a mentoring process for themselves. Then typically it's not very easy, because technology has leveraged so much. I mean, we use SuccessFactors and all these tools. Technology has enabled coaching and mentoring to be very easy, right? So when I speak to my coach in Singapore, it's a very seamless process. So technology is an enabler today, and it's become very easy. But to create this coaching culture that that being nimble, simple, approachable, listening, all those has to be in part of inculcated into your culture.
Very interesting. Just one more question, Ishan. Now, your organization has a large headcount, right? With Surani, the headcount is smaller, so everyone relatively knows each other. With Chandi, at the structures are global projects; they know who is each other. But how do they find these mentors? In addition to your clubs, what is the visibility in terms of who they need to tap into? How do you create that in such a large employee base?
Yeah. So what happened is we segregated training and development from talent management. Typically what happens is, when you mix the two, you don't get visibility into the talent, because you're focusing on the training and bridging the skills gaps. That identifying the real talent is lost in the forest kind of thing, right? So we carved out this separately, and we said so we have the 9-box session, one-to-one mapping and all that, and the proactive attrition, as well as proactive retention interviews and all this, to see that how do we tap into the best talent, how do we identify the best talent. So it's not only performance, you have to give a lot of attention on the potential. You have to use your 70-20-10 model in your training, and when feedback comes from projects, to see, okay, who are the emerging leaders. So there is multiple sources of information that has to come together, and multiple levels of interactions. So we do this at plant level, we do this as company level, we do this at group level, then we do that functional level. So the marketing team holistically, the operations team holistically, finance. So you have to have all these cuts to carve out the creme de la creme. And that's one. And then in the new talent, you also have to create process for the top post talent to go there very fast. So what we did was, our management training program, for example, is a 2-year program. They go around doing everything, including sewing a garment. They go to all functions. They know finance and everything. Like example, when we put up our Rambukkana factory, which is a very state of the art, the second in charge was a management trainee during the management training period, because that person was a top engineer under an engineer. So you have to also take the risk of giving that, trusting that they can deliver. But to long story short, is that identification of talent, top talent, it's the job of not HR, but all the leaders in the company.
It's fascinating. Surani and Chandi, you want to add anything to what Ishan said?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think identifying, sometimes what happens is, when it's a large organization, if you're building a coaching platform, like Ishan said, you can use technology and you can build the platform. But when you're implementing it, the key thing is, how do you select the coaches, and how do you, have a set of criteria that you look at that shows that individual is actually ready to be a coach, and what level of readiness. And maybe the organization can even invest in that individual. And then you have the individual maybe as a phase 1 to look at who are your critical talent, who you want to put through this program. So you kind of get the learnings from that, And the critical talent, like Ishan said, could be looking at the 9 blocker, the performance potential matrix, and also looking at the scarcity. If that individual leaves, how long does it take for me to hire that person? If that individual leaves, how scarce is that individual in the market? The client perspective, how difficult it is for me to replace, talent perspective. So looking at all those metrics, you can decide, okay, maybe this pool of people, I need to, and at these levels, I need to put them through this program. And then select very carefully who your coaches are and level them as well. And then you run the program. And you can actually incorporate that in order to build a culture. So you keep training the coaches on how to coach from the company perspective as well, like Ishan is doing. And then it might be even good to have a mechanism where you incorporate that to your performance management. So in case you have a digital platform where you get all of this feedback, what employees are doing other than just doing their job, and you put a percentage weightage, for example, if they have done 10 coaching sessions, they get some sort of a badge, and a percentage of that goes into their performance management, saying this person has done this. Or if they do a certain amount of training programs, they get a badge called Guru Badge, where that has some weightage. So that way the employee is not just looking at merely performing, but is also being acknowledged and recognized for doing these other things in the organization. So if you have that full circle incorporation, I think then you are going to be having a successful process. But I think it is always good to take it phase by phase. Phase 1 is this, and then phase 2, because then it becomes a culture. Because the guys who were coached now can become the coaches as well.
If I may just add, I mean, what I've realized in every industry I've worked in is the first 6 months is when you start losing people. Your highest attrition rates are for 6 months. And therefore, the mentoring is vital for new employees. And it doesn't have to be a very senior manager or a manager doing that. It can be something simple as the famous buddy system, where you have a colleague who steps in to help this person settle in that first 6 months. And I think that's very, very vital. Thereafter, of course, a more sort of detailed mentoring coaching can happen, but I think it's very, very vital that for 6 months. And that is something that you don't really need money. You don't need actually even that much of training. It's that, you know, great employee who you could trust to simply help a colleague along. So, and that's important, I think.
Thank you. It's been a fascinating conversation. However, time is really catching up with us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each one of you very quickly to give you one takeaway in terms of you know, for the HR and talent functions and even CEOs of SMEs and large companies. How do you, you know, what do you need to do to really, you know, grab this prosperity that will come in the post-COVID era? Anyone can go, please.
So I'll go. So my take is using digital technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, for example, and also data analytics, and moving forward, personalizing the employee experience in order to give a more personalized experience and to build an emotional connect with your employees, looking at all the processes that you have.
Excellent. And these technologies are quite cheap these days. You know, you don't have to, you can get licenses for very small number of people and implement it as well. Anybody else? Yes, please.
Okay, so okay, one piece would be there's some incredible youngsters out there, and we also have some incredible highly seasoned professionals out there. And due to COVID, impact of COVID, there's quite a lot of good, talented people out there available to help you out. And I think gone are the days that, you know, we stick to a certain profile of employee. And I think as employers, this is a great opportunity to really go pick. Forget age, forget retirement, forget gender, I mean, there are people who can help you support your organization. Just take that time to go look for it. So that's my advice, I think.
Okay. Ishan?
Okay. So what I think is, you know, change is consistent. We'll have to live with it. So that's given. So I think what we should encourage our employees is, one, to be creative, two, to simplify the processes so that, just to see that, the outcome driven, and always think positive. Just to quote an example, simplification, we cut our entire group's goals from all what we had just to 5 for the entire group for everyone. So you've got to simplify your process, and they're all outcome based so that everyone knows. So if I repeat, just be creative, simplify process, and think positively, because change will happen, but you will be successful.
Okay. On behalf of Economics and the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Economic Freedom Sri Lanka office, I'd like to thank Ishan, Surani, and Chandi for your very valuable time in helping equip and empower our business leaders from the SME sector and large corporates, in this vital task of succeeding in the post-pandemic era and bringing prosperity to our country. Which is something that we desperately require and something that all of us are looking forward to. So thank you for your time, and thank you for the viewer for tuning in. Please continue watching this webinar series on Economy Next on the platform, and also the post-event content as well. Thank you for our panelists, and thank you for tuning in.